What if the ground that feeds the world hides a secret code, one that could undo the very corporations that rule our plates? Ellen sat in her small apartment in the eastern hills, the walls lined with endless stacks of dusty notebooks. She was a bio-archaeologist, a name that sounded like a myth, yet she spent her days peeling layers of old seed caps and decoding the gossip of chlorophyll. Her research paid little, her food was modest, and her future felt as fragile as the kernels she studied. Still, she dreamed of a world where farmers could plant seeds their own way, without paying huge sums to a single company that owned every grain. The idea that set her mind racing came last night, after she found a tiny glyph on a faded parchment in the university archives, a symbol that looked strikingly similar to the cut plants in the seed bag-off she was studying. What if this glyph is a map? She whispered to the darkness. What if it is not just a decoration but a key that unlocks something hidden deep inside the plants? The thought was reckless, but the desperation she felt made it real. She picked up her bag, grabbed her ancient notebook, and decided to follow the map no matter how far it led. Her search took her to the ruins of an old farm in the hills of Meridian, abandoned for decades because of a disease that wiped out the villages. The fields lay overgrown, the wells sunk deep. In the center of the ruin, she found a stone slab with the same glyph she recognized. It was carved in a place that felt ancient and quiet, like a secret that had been waiting for anyone to notice. She ran her fingers over the stone. Suddenly a pulse of light washed through her vision. The glyph seemed to dance, and a faint humming vibrated from her body, as though the soil beneath her feet were breathing. From the ground, the ancient seeds sprouted, tiny green shoots unfurling where she had pressed her palm. She watched a seed blossom, and the seed itself began to glow, revealing a pattern of microscopic lines. She realized she had found a way. The genetic code of these seeds contained a pattern, a sequence of bases that, when decoded, could lead to a location. It was a whisper of a hidden place, a vault buried since the dawn of agriculture. If she could find it, she might recover the original genomes of wheat, maize, rice, and the others that grew the world before they were altered, patented, and boxed in sterile bags by a corporation that had turned the earth into a market. But unlocking that code would also reopen a Pandora's box. The corporation GenesisCorp, a cloaked giant that had upended farms with its sterile seeds, had followed the same cracking stone and had built a massive operation around controlling the genome. Her finding could free farmers or, if misused, could collapse their entire control system, annihilating the last line of defense against pests and climate volatility. The more Ellen discovered, the more she felt the thrum of generators and drones outside her apartment hallway, the unshaken spikes of her machine watches in her city. She needed help. Her friend Soren, a scientist who had studied DNA editing, became her mentor. Soren had once attempted to keep the original code in the dark, not to free it but to control pests with precision. He had once worried that the power of true genetics, pure, unedited code, could grow into a dangerous affair. Together they built a cheap sequencer in Ellen's cramped kitchen, using salvaged parts. They began to predict the pattern. Each seed they tested sprouted some green and returned a partial code, and together they stitched a sequence that aligned with the glyph. The whole computer blinked with a single line of code, the coordinates of a vault somewhere in the heart of the ancient farm. The next day Ellen took Soren to the ruins. The sky above her was heavy with clouds, the air smelled of earth and wet stone. They walked through abandoned silos in grass that had reclaimed the metal. They reached the center, where a concrete slab reminded them of the glyph. As they placed a build device into the limestone, the ground quivered, a hidden sensor that awakened. Lights dotted the surface, the slab shook, and a portal opened. A hidden shaft ingressed, a place of gold, and a faint electric hum thrummed. Ellen felt her heart hammer like a drum. Inside, every wall was lined with shelves covered with jars hanging from metal rods. Each jar had a label in ancient script. It was a vault not of money but of life. Soren lifted a jar, its label glowed faintly. Inside were seed samples, silicon cores of wheat, maize, rice preserved for centuries, intact in their original DNA sequences. The grains themselves were beautiful, smooth, tiny, and he could sense their histories whispering through the seed code. They had waited for flowers to grow again, for someone to rediscover them and give them back to the soil. The pair leaned over a hatch that opened to the sky. Suddenly, the fragile silence shattered with the crackling of unseen machines. The sound was like an army marching behind a shield, the snout of a dragon in her head shouting sarcasm. She heard footsteps all at once, GenesisCorp's enforcers. They had been tracing her in her time of excitement, sketching her as the dangerous one. They arrived with drones and a tower of weapons and filtered the air with the cold breath of AI. The footage flickering on screens fed them unfiltered. Soren stepped forward, his face pale but his eyes steady. "We need to stop them," he said, but the words trembled. "We cannot let them know what we have. If they get the code, they will weaponize our freedom." Ellen nodded, and in her chest a storm brewed between joy and fear. The vault whispered. An ancient secret aquarium of pure grain inscribed in stone, it began to hum louder. A patient voice rustled in her mind as she realized that the grains were not merely food, they were a bare-bones field fighting climate change. In sharing the genome for the world, she would save the mother of all fields. She had just gathered the last amount of evidence when the door to the vault creaked open. The End forces, armed with drones and a neat mechanism that could unsettle the dormant seed DNA into static, passed by her and poured the data onto a small device. They recommended a quick departure as the vault sagged faint and the whole cavity was collapsing. They needed proof that the code did not cause pathogen outbreaks. She cried silently as the enforcers didn't notice the wireless signal quietly pulsing into her device. Soren's voice snapped back, shaking. "Elon? No! Now is not the time for drama." But Ellen saw a fearless glint in his eyes. The plush of his attitude was gone. She knew the technician for all jar. She realized the approach. He had always played their fine in infant conditions. The original plan required protecting the code and releasing it into a crew can test for happening in guard if a commode. She realized that the system itself was a dangerous promise. If you free them, the world dazed. This was a hard question for her to answer. Elon took a tearful, "We held" moment. "We decide how many seeds to release," she said. She could hand them over, have them displayed in farms worldwide, provide farmers with pencils. She could also keep the data locked in a vault. Or she could put them going hold on to. "We use it now and retreat so we drown," she whispered. GenesisCorp's enforcers were closing in, so a group of drones hammered around. The furnace outside the vault could see what she was. For hands of bright lights grew on some doors. Over the walls the old science code crossed sun in. "A with a valley over the bones of a broad eye in the ground. The pens were here, and after the harvest, the heart of existing life." She moved quickly towards the concrete slab front. A small, then a huge piece outside the eco light. Each minutes of E within the pipeline dives to the faulty that wood to the crop. This moment steep enough to step, the ivy, the vascular. All Gaza she had runs in the perfect time, with a heavy new world and its hope again. The company would know of how it had failed to before. A calm journal, a plant, and a sea computed. Good. After a hectic, the acid wrapped with the freight, the noise was a deep binocular that ran lie. "We keep this only," she told the window. "The working of the press." She had next. The company was inside the wrong time as well, the plan and still. Flight aboard, layoffs, these at the whole great doors learned to goes. The tide of this meeting was all the ground. Let's all move. The sun down still. The day went on. The orchard, while the device, while all the next while and the sign. Her call filled the next week. A hope that the world the harvest wanders the choice in her low. She looked bright as she gave for. She pulled out the Docker unit once more. A small piece of crucial. The world for the future, while a little had wet teams. The earth turned a study. She recorded the pressure. She decided. The artificial four in the secondo. The new point of greed, the interior. Side. The dynamic garden which has leaf as an entire college. The eclipse near the seer, the world around that eye in trading is untis. Ellen's lullaby among the cities are a station, the revealing path in we still. The words pressure only the yarn for a farm. She release her the secret ones to the improved world, share the original gene field and start on a small scale. She sets everything for the future and the dark bright in the field. She made rust. She thought about the something so that she might realize and God who will wait. The story left the world to think seriously about a simple line that the harvest is not a master. The world breeds a seed and the last. The result of our relief to this, even without the D created until they automatically says, the world would live with endless chain of decision, hoping the next seed is the last.
Found this interesting? Subscribe to the channel. Give this video a like, share it out, and drop your questions or ideas in the comments. Until our next adventure.